So hello and welcome to this episode of the Coffee Snobs Podcast. My name is Aaron. We have
Chad Lingafelt.
And then we also have
Tyler Dancy
with us today. And this is a really exciting topic because I really think as we've built the Coffee Snobs Podcast, it's really about education. It's really not about hoity-toityness. It's really about how life's too short to drink bad coffee, and we want to help you make better coffee. And today's topic is better home coffee and really getting down to the basics. We know we can deep dive into this, and these guys are really going to help me rein in my snobbiness. So guys, what is new with you in the coffee game?
Man, I've been playing around a lot with pour over. So I'm a big fan of espresso and Americanos and all that, but I go on these extremes of all espresso and then I'll flip back and do just pour over. And we also have a siphon brew here, which it's one of these things that takes a lot of kind of prep work and time to do.
That's like a mad scientist. Can you explain that for me?
Siphon brew. So basically you have a water reservoir on the bottom. You heat it up to a boiling point. Once it gets to boiling point, you take the coffee, which is the same coarseness like a kind of a French press.
Okay.
And once you create that siphon or that suction, the water goes up into the top reservoir, steeps at a high rate, and then once you remove the heat from the bottom, then it drops the brewed coffee down through a screen filter, and it is a smooth, just amazing cup of coffee, and it's completely different. I actually did a tasting the other day with some folks, and I did the same bean, run through the espresso, pour over, and siphon brew. Mm-hmm. Completely different taste on all three of them, but It's a great experience.
Dude, that sounds like a fun experience. That sounds like it needs to be a YouTube video.
Exactly. Future video coming at you.
Yeah, seriously. So what about you, Tyler?
Tyler, I have not a whole lot new. Honestly, I think currently at home I'm brewing Huckleberry coffee. That's the coffee that the roaster's out of Denver, Colorado. And the blend I have is called Phantom Limb. And I am typically drawn to more non-traditional. I mean, I can have a coffee that's got, the hints of caramel and chocolate and nuttiness, but I like something that has a lot more of the fruit palettes in it and flavors. So
what about flowers? Do you like the flower flavors?
No, I'm not big on the flowers.
The floral is a lighter roast, which the Phantom Limb has it, but it's definitely not that green, it's definitely not that green roast. That sure. Phantom Limb Huckleberry.
But you're liking some of the fruit.
Yeah, I like, it escapes me right now, the exact fruits that are in it. But anyway, it's just a really, it's one of the first coffees that I've drank that, you read all these notes on the bag of all these tasting profiles and all of it. Even in in a latte, a milk-based drink, I could still taste like a fruity flavor, which is really, really good, really expressive. So
yeah, that's a good bag of coffee.
What about you?
Well, I'm excited because I am headed to Louisville, Kentucky for the grand opening of a coffee shop called Shiloh's Coffee. Cool. And the reason why I'm excited about it is because Shiloh is a coffee shop that's supported by the coffee shop that got me into coffee, like Sunnergrass. And literally it is a turnkey solution where Shiloh's went to Sunnergrass and said, hey, we want to do a coffee shop, and Sunnergrass supplies the beans. They've supplied the machines. They've educated and trained the baristas. So it is a turnkey solution of Sunnergrass.
Cool.
It's very cool. Going to do a podcast there. I'm excited to get more beans, which a really cool thing. They do beans. They throw the label of Shiloh Coffee on the Sunnergrass beans. And Shiloh has a really good mission and model, and so I'll be talking about that later, but really excited about that upcoming trip.
Very cool.
That happens very soon.
Awesome. Well, I know the topic of today's conversation is really all about kind of the basics, right? Yeah. And so we were talking about this before, and I know I categorize people in kind of one or two different areas, and there's probably more than that, but you have a person that's going to really, they get excited about something new. It might be coffee, it might be, skiing, whatever. Yep. And their mode is they go and they buy the top of the line, everything. Like, hey, I'm gonna just immerse myself into this process and I want everything top of the line. And you have other people that just like to kind of step their toes into it and test it and see if it's something that they like and then grow over time. Which, I don't know that there's one that's better than the other, but when you're talking about basics of coffee, how do you get into this process? Do you have to go full on in and go invest $2,000 in all of this equipment and these beans, or can you get into it in a slow process?
Sure. Yeah, I think there's, if you got that much money, then you can definitely invest a lot of money in this. But I think there are quite a few things that you can do that are relatively inexpensive to have better, consistent coffee at home. So
I would agree. And I would actually say if you are in this journey of coffee and you're maybe right at the beginning, take your time. There are some really good pieces of equipment that will help you yield a better cup of coffee, but don't necessarily go all in on those at the beginning. I will say make some bad investments, which will then hone you into a better system and flow. I mean, for me, I started out with garbage equipment, like seriously, like, walk through, the Keurig, then walk through a Mr. Coffee, then went back to the Keurig for a season, then made a pour over French press. I've got like 3 French presses at the house. I haven't done an AeroPress yet. I've walked through this journey. Like currently our kettle is a Coleman camping kettle that is probably older than all of us combined. Like honestly, it's Brittany's grandfather, and honestly, I think it's like post-war era. It's like crazy old, but it still works, and we use it. But we know that there are better equipment out there, and I have a Breville espresso machine, so I did make that investment, but it has been a slow, gradual process, and I think that's led us to one of the next topics is in this home brewing process, how to make better cups of coffee. I don't think that the equipment necessarily is what yields a better cup of coffee, in my opinion, and we're going to dig down to it. So yes, this is the Coffee Snob Podcast, and it does lend itself probably to a little hoity-toity kind of idea, but I believe you can make a really good cup of coffee with love and care, and that starts with the roaster. And so if you're got a roaster that has a roast by date, I think that's a good place to start. So to get a good cup of coffee, it's not about the water at this moment. It's not about the grind at this moment. It's literally about the bean, and that's where you start. And then it all starts from there. So we can only produce the best of what we start with, right? And so, if you were going to tell somebody where to start, Chad, on a bag of coffee, okay, because we're going to say level 1 is get a good bag of coffee. What would you tell?
Of all the different coffee that I've kind of tasted as an entry point, because I experienced a lot of even the Trader Joe beans. That's another grocery store here. I guess Trader Joe's is more of a national.
It's national.
Okay. Yeah. And they've got a whole coffee station. So I started with that. But I really think that counterculture for me is kind of like that. It's a good starting bean.
And it's a national, so you can get it everywhere all across the United States.
Yeah, for those of you that don't know, counterculture is one of the granddaddies in third wave coffee as far as they're a very nationwide respected roaster. They are headquartered out of Durham, North Carolina, but they have places out in Los Angeles, New York. I mean, they're pretty big time.
Yeah, and they have training facilities in pretty much every major city. Yeah. And I think they're ushering in that next wave of really high level coffee. Yep. And so starting with the bean, I think that's a great start. Yep. Counterculture, I think we would all put our label, the Coffee Snobs stamp on that, and to start with the bean. And then the next process is, in my opinion, the coffee. So you got to grind. But if you want to just save, make it as easy as possible, you can grind it at the grocery store in a coarse grind, because I think that's going to lend itself to most of the processes that people are getting, the base level processes. So a coarse grind is going to work with a Mr. Coffee. It's going to work if you have a Keurig, a little adapter cup. It's going to work if you're doing a French press, pour over, that's going to really work. You're going to be able to fine tune that grind later on.
Yeah.
But that next process is going to be your coffee to water ratio. And so I know we all have different stances on this, because I'm the guy that's measuring everything out to the gram. But what are your thoughts and processes on the coffee to water ratio? Where do y'all kind of stand?
Well, for those of you that don't know what we're talking about, coffee to water ratio, if you look on the side of most bags or tins or whatever you get of coffee, it's going to say, use 2 scoops of coffee per cup of water. So 2 scoops of coffee beans is going to yield a cup of coffee that's going to be maybe as strong as you like, maybe not strong as you like. So that's a fine way. Some people do that. I think that's how Chad even does a lot of his pour overs. However, just using a scoop can sometimes be inconsistent. 1 scoop, if you weigh it out, might be 8 grams of coffee. It might be 10. So if you really want to be consistent, what I do is I weigh my beans, and that's not an expensive process. You can find kitchen scales on Amazon for $10. Now, they're not maybe the most accurate, but for those of you that don't know, or let's use this as an example, pour over. That's a pretty easy method to make at home. Rule of thumb with pour overs is a 16-to-1 ratio.
Yep.
So 16 grams of water for every gram of beans. So a simple way to think about that is 10 grams of beans should yield you 160 grams of finished coffee.
Yep.
That's going to be if that's stronger than you like, then you can back it off. You can do 14 grams. If it's the opposite, and you can go 18 grams.
And that's really the reason for measuring it, is so that way you can start to fine tune the type of flavoring that you like. So I know that weighing it out can be frustrating, but I mean, I've been weighing out for like multiple months now, like down to recording the data, so that way I can produce, I know what the ratio that I like. And I know that different coffee beans, through the Sunnergrass or what I like, I know that different bags have a different water to coffee ratio. And I know that's getting super detailed, and maybe that's not where you're ever going to be, but that's where I am. And so that's how we're, delivering good cups of coffee, which kind of sets up to, Chad, like what do you do?
You guys spend a lot of time on that process, but not what I've done in the past. I've always admired the weighing part of it, and I probably could reverse what I'm doing now and actually get the weights, but I don't. I have visual memorization of how many beans I put in my grinder, and then I have a visual memorization of how many grinds I put in the Chemex paper filter, and how much water I use, and how much I fill it up. So it's a
muscle memory.
It's a repeatable process, but I'm not using a scale.
Sure.
So I think that's really what I've learned from it is a variation of that, where if you use too little, not enough coffee versus too much, and then figuring out, if the grind is too fine, especially for a pour over, then it starts kind of getting that gooey, just sut looking to it, and then the coffee just tastes really bad. So I've kind of tweaked a lot of that over time, and I guess I could probably have shortened that process if I would have
weighed it out.
Well,
but some of us like to do it the hard way.
Exactly.
But anyway, I think that's we're all kind of doing the same thing. Figure out what you can do as a repeatable process. If you do it by grams.
Yeah, and one of the things I would
works.
recommend in this process is stick to a measurement. So don't cross measure, meaning don't go with grams and ounces.
Mm-hmm.
Stay with whatever works for you. I like grams. Sounds
more snobberish.
Well, it does. But I've learned, I've learned the gram to ounce ratio. So I know most everything is going to weigh out in ounces for cups. So you're making 8 ounces of coffee. I know my gram ratio, but with that, it's really just recording the data, knowing it that way, because you're not just going to day one master this. And I heard recently there's a female that her title is Coffee Master. Like, she has been dubbed that. And one of the quotes that she said is, "You're never going to master coffee."
Yeah.
And you're just not going to. You're going to make a great cup today, and you're going to try to recreate that process. But when you get down to it, the barometric pressure, the density, I mean, everything's going to change. The water temperature,
and beans change if you have a bag that's been sitting there for a while. Then
right.
the way the bean is going to actually react is going to be completely different.
Right.
So, and even you go back into a counterculture, any roaster, they're going to have a lot of variations based off of their beans that you have to change.
Right, that season, right, the seasonal bean,
yeah.
right. So, like, I know currently at this moment, I think it's Big Trouble. It has changed drastically in the last 2 months of the taste, because if you read the bag, the way that the beans are supplemented, it's not a single origin. It's not, one specific bean from that area. Always they're mixing and matching it. And so that's just the way that coffee works. So you're going to find something that's good today. That's why I like trying so many different bags of coffee. Because if I get on something that I really enjoy, hey, I'll put it in my mix. Yeah. But I'm constantly bringing it in, because at some point in time, I'm going to come across some garbage, and I want to be able to go back on something. So,
sure.
But that kind of leads us into this home process, and I'll kind of give you an example of what I have done to really kind of, which has changed my mom's coffee drinking experience. So we did a travel trip, and I was weighing everything out, and really trying to, I've been in this process to produce really good cups of coffee. And I came across this roaster out of Winston-Salem, very, very good, and made this cup of coffee for my mom. And it would not take much longer than a drip setup.
And what method was that you made?
That was a pour over setup. And so that's a Chemex, and then a gooseneck kettle, to I think it was 185 degrees temp is kind of the temp set on that kettle. And so, the process that you go over, pour over, and it was a very, very good cup of coffee. And my mom drank that cup of coffee, and she was like, "This is amazing."
What kind of coffee does your mom normally drink?
She's a Starbucks way into work person. And so I think her palate is more the burnt.
Yeah.
And she also has the donut shop K-cups. And so that's her rotation.
Now, where did the 185 degree temperature come from?
So different diving deep, different beans have different notes will be pulled out by different temperatures. Mm-hmm. So you can definitely put a hotter cup of different water to it and yield a different taste by just taking and adding different temperatures of water. So for one of the things that, having a kettle that's dialed in, that's another variable that you can lock in so that that you're going to get this consistent yield from this water temperature in the coffee. So having that is just another variable. All you're going to do through this process is find another variable that you can record or dial in. Yeah. And that's really what you're doing with how to make a good cup of coffee. It's record that data, then try to replicate that. And then once you can replicate it, then find another piece of data that you can kind of control and move on. And so, but this pour over process, it was so good that my mom literally asked, I think she asked you, Tyler, what gooseneck kettle she should buy. She ordered everything to Amazon. And now my mom is making pour overs in the morning. And one of my friends was talking with my dad, and my dad was telling my friend about the pour over setup because it was the best cup of coffee that he's ever had. Yeah. And that to me is one, exciting because life is too short to drink bad coffee. And when you've drank whatever you've drank for years and you all of a sudden get something that you're like, man, coffee doesn't have to taste terrible.
Yeah.
It's actually an enjoyable beverage. I think that's really what this podcast is about, is how can we help you make a good cup of coffee? And it's not something that takes forever. I want you to know, if the process is taking you a long time, you're not going to do it.
Yeah. Well, I think that's something that I've picked up from being around you, Aaron, is that you find ways to to record the data and then set it up so that it can be replicated.
Automated.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously. So like for my mom's example, I know that my mom's not going to get up and weigh her beans in the morning. So what she does is she has little Ziploc baggies, and on a weekend, she'll go through and weigh out 18 grams of coffee in these bags. And so now all she does is opens the bag, pours it in her hopper, grinds it, puts it in her portafilter, has her kettle already set to the temp, turns it on, and now she's making a cup of coffee. It sped the process up so much, and that frustration of weighing the beans out is now moved to a 10-minute process on the week instead of a minute every morning of getting the scale out, making sure it's zeroed. We've even taken her carafe, and we've marked on the side of it for different grams of water. So now she doesn't have to like weigh the carafe. She just puts it in, puts her coffee in, starts pouring water, and then once it fills to that level, she knows she's good to go.
Yeah.
And so that's how the process that I think when it becomes a time-consuming, multiple steps, I have to think about it, you're not going to do it.
Yeah.
So you're going to invest money, and then it's going to sit on the shelf, and you're going to be like, this is not worth it. And so my whole deal of diving into the data is making it easy as possible. And so I know you, Tyler, you have a different kind of setup slightly. I mean, what do you do for your homebrew setup?
Well, I do a pour over, primarily during the work week. My wife and I both get up early for work. I weigh my stuff out every morning, but it takes me like 4 to 5 minutes because I walk into the kitchen, get some water in the kettle, start it boiling, weigh my beans out. For me, I've done it enough, like be it muscle memory or just routine. I'm fresh grinding and weighing beans every morning, but at the same time, I'm, like I said, start to finish, maybe 5-6 minutes, and I'm having enough pour over that my wife and I can both have a couple cups. So,
so let me give you a few takeaways because I really want something that you can tangibly walk away with and be like, okay, I can try this to make a little bit better cup of coffee. If you've got beans, I would say start with getting whole beans, not pre-ground. If you grind them at the grocery store, put them back in the bag, and then put them in an airtight container at home. Start there, okay? Then your next is the water to coffee ratio. So I know it may be difficult to measure, but a good base number to start with is 16.5 to 1. And so that's 1 gram of coffee, 16.5 grams of yielded coffee water made. So start there, and if you want 300 grams of coffee water, then you're using 18 grams of coffee beans. So that right there, those two variables, bean coffee and then water coffee ratio, then try your different temps. If you have a kettle you can control, try different ratios. I currently will fluctuate from a 13.5 to an 18, depending on the area or the region where the coffee's coming from. But that kind of sets you the tone of the snobbiness that I am, and these guys really have to rein me in because I can.
Well, I was just thinking through as I was kind of just for some more measurables on that, as I was first starting through different processes with pour over, I used to keeps track of my measurement of water by using water bottles. So I would pop up, and this was before we have some of the setup we have here, but I would pop up in a water bottle, and it was 20 ounces or whatever was in there, and that's how I knew exactly how much water I was putting through, and I less of a scale, but more of either a scoop or visual on the pour over. But yeah, just figuring out what that is to maintain consistency, because you have to figure it out at one point. So is the temperature, am I going to maintain the temperature consistency and then adjust my beans?
Right.
Or am I going to, figure out one constant and then change your variables on that? So if it's the amount of water versus the temperature or the bean grinding or whatever.
Yeah. I will give one more, and this is a pro tip. Okay. This is okay.
AKA nerd tip.
Yeah. Nerd tip. Use filtered water. So here recently, I put in a water filtration system in my kitchen which now is a reverse osmosis process, which literally moves everything out. And I know the guys are giving me scowls right now because like I'm getting really nerdy, but
hey,
it is a big difference.
We have a water distiller here.
It's a big difference.
Yeah, we go purified and then I put a filtered and then we go put it through a distiller.
It's seriously like I'll tell you, it took me almost a week once I put that in because I was like, my coffee tastes terrible, but I actually was just removing all of our city water is horrible, and they constantly change the mixture, so it's not a consistent anything. So, but yeah, that's water filtration.
Wow. So. That's very interesting. I think obviously Aaron is more of the approach Chad was mentioning early on. He's all in. He's dialed in.
Yep.
Sounds like your mom.
Yep.
She tasted good coffee. She wanted to go in. Yep. So let's try to maybe wrap up with, let's say you find somebody that's not quite willing to go that far, that quick. What would you say, Chad, is the most basic, cheapest thing you can do to get a better cup of home coffee?
I tell you what I did is I found beans that I liked and then I went with a French press.
Okay.
Beans was in a French press.
Yeah, I mean it was a $20 investment for equipment, and I mean you can boil hot water however you want, but that got me into a completely that got me out of a Keurig.
Yep.
Right.
Okay.
So a French press got me out of a Keurig.
Yep. What about you, Tyler?
I think. Again, for some reason, my parents just come to mind because they drink coffee every morning. They're using a drip coffee method, and lots of people across the country are using terrible coffee that they get at the store. If you find coffee that does not have a roasted on date and it just simply has an expiration date, that probably means it's really, really old.
Yeah.
So, at the bare basics, find some good coffee. Like we keep mentioning counterculture because you can find that in a grocery store here in the Charlotte area. It's really not that expensive for a bag. So even if you or your parents, your friends, family are still using drip coffee or, God forbid, the Keurig, the most base equation is use good coffee.
Yeah.
So even if you're still using it in like a reusable K-cup filter or drip coffee, if you get good coffee that is fresh ground, that's the first step in, having better coffee. Yep. I think that's about as simple as you can get it.
I think y'all guys, that is dead on. I don't think there's anything else I can add to that. Like, that's really good. That's the good spot.
The sweet spot.
The sweet spot.
Next time.
Yep.
Next time, we are going to talk on episode 3. I believe the topic is going to be cold brew or cold coffee during the summertime.
Yeah, summertime heat.
Looking forward to talking about that later on. You, the listener, if you have any questions or comments or topics that you think you would like to be hearing more from us, just please shoot us an email, tag us on social media.
Yeah, and let us know your coffee setup.
Sure.
We would love to talk about your setup, and if you have any questions on how to dial in data or information, I am the data junkie. I love it. I have more data than necessary, and
all right. So we're going to be signing off for now. Chad, if the listeners want to reach out to you, where can we find you?
The easiest way is locdoc.net/connect. That's going to actually connect you up to everything that I'm about.
Look at that.
Lockdoc.net/connect.
That's easy.
Aaron, what about you?
Boom. You can find me on the Instagram at Aaron Beaver, AARONBEAVER, or on the YouTube, which is The Suffer Club, SUFFER Club, The Suffer Club.
So not Supper Club.
No, not related to Suffer Club.
Okay. And me, Tyler, I am on social media on the Twitters and Instagram at Dancy, TYDANCY. So, again, thank you for listening to this episode of the Coffee Snobs. Yep. Like, comment, respond, give us hate mail wherever you find your podcast. Be sure to check out our YouTube channel. We got a lot of interesting, fun stuff coming up there. So, alrighty, guys, until next time.
It's been fun, guys.
Boom.